Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This is Dean West. I'm president of Association Laboratory, and believe it or not, this is our 25th year in business. And I'm both excited and saddened that I've made it this far as a company, but can't be happier about the people I've met and the activities and things I have the opportunity to do. And one of the people I've met over the years is our guest today on 25 Lessons in Leadership. Gary LaBranche. He has had the unfortunate role of actually being my executive director when I was on the board of directors of the association forum. And I got to ask him all the hard questions and expect he as a staff person to respond, which of course he always did. Outstanding exec. Gary, welcome.
Hey, great to be here with you, and congratulations on 25 outstanding years with Association Laboratory.
Thank you very
Congratulations.
much. Yeah, it is. You and I were talking before. You look down and go to work. Also, you look up and you've been at work a long time. And I am honestly the things I've done, the people I've met, and the places I've been as a result of Association Laboratory, and frankly, a career in association management is just frankly a great testament to how wonderful our sector is. Why don't you bring everybody up to speed a little bit on your own journey?
Oh, and my journey, well, it's been a little longer than 25 years. This is, I guess, my 42nd year in and around the association management world, and I've been CEO of a number of different groups, including the Association Forum, the Association for Corporate Growth, which served the middle market private equity community, the NERI, the Investor Relations Society, which served the public sector, publicly traded company sector. And now I'm Chief Executive Officer of RIMS, the RIMS Risk and Insurance Management Society, which oddly enough serves the Risk Management Society community, which is a global community, and it's about a $22 million budget organization, and I've really been loving it for the last couple of years. So it's and earlier in the career, I worked for ASAE and worked for the United States Chamber of Commerce, and so been around, bopping around here and there for a while. And sort of following on what you said, my career has allowed me to do things and go places and meet people and have experiences that I could never have imagined. When I started in
Sure.
this business, I literally just came home from a round the world business trip. Last night I just casually booked another trip to London. We do a program with Lloyd's of London every year. It's just like, and the experiences, the people, the knowledge you gain, the circumstances that you're in, the problems that you get to solve. And some of those were not fun or easy, like, oh, I don't know, COVID, inability to have a convention for a couple of years, and financial meltdown of 08, 09. There have been some bumps in the road along the way, but boy, oh boy, it's been fun.
Yeah, opportunities to prove your mettle, as they say.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
if it was easy, any high school kid would do it. That's what I
that's
look at
right.
it. Gary, you might not remember this, but I remember several years ago, more than several, this is pre-pandemic. So there's everything, pandemic is the big
Right.
fighting
Yeah,
line.
it's pre-pandemic,
So
the
before the
before
pandemic, it's
times and the
100 years ago.
after.
It's like saying back in the pre-century or something
Right.
in ancient history. This when we were reviewed the scrolls. I remember writing an article based on looking forward sector research about changes in advocacy. And I always remember you sent me an article by actual mail, not electronic mail, that you had written, I think in the 80s, it might have been early 90s, about advocacy.
Mhm.
And your point to me was on the post-it note was we could have written this article about advocacy at any point in our history.
Interesting.
And I think my point was it's all really different and it's all really hard and there's more communication channels. I think that's what was starting to show up in our sector research. And you basically, you're not a counterpoint, but your education to me was the same problems we had in the 90s were the same problems we had in the 80s were the same problems we had in the 70s, in that the actual advocacy environment wasn't that different. Well, one of our goals on these interviews, Gary, is really to talk about the future. And so I want to give that as an example. If I pluck you out of your desk and I plop you down 10, 20 years in the future, and you look back at the association profession, What do you think the most substantial changes in leadership are going to be? What might be obsolete? What might be new? Give me a sense of what we might see from the future looking back.
You
That's an
know,
essay. That's an essay question, by the way. So that's
that's an essay question. So I'll bore you and bore anybody who wants to watch this by giving a little perspective, little story. So I've been a member of the U.S. Chambers Association Committee 100 since 2004 or so. But before that, actually, when I worked at the U.S. Chamber, I was the executive to the Committee 100. And in 1993, when I was there, I discovered a project that the committee had done in the 60s that looked forward to the next 20 years of association management and made predictions about it.
okay.
So I discovered that, which was way pre-digital. So it was in a couple of pieces of paper in a file somewhere. Everybody had forgotten about it. So I thought, well, it would be interesting to replicate this. And so in 1994, I got the committee together and we did that. We sort of said, let's look into the next 20 years and what are we going to project or what's our predictions and that sort of thing. And then we did it again in 2014. So that in as far as I know is the longest longitudinal future study kind of thing by the same group. Now the group changes over the years, right? Obviously.
Sure.
But the interesting thing, and I've written articles about this. The interesting to me, the thing about the many things from those three studies was when I look back on it, there were a lot of things that the group got right and a lot of things they got wrong, but also a lot of things that they completely missed. That was not at all on their radar. And in particular, I bring up in 1994, one person was talking about the World Wide Web. Yeah. And within a year, the internet, the World Wide Web completely changed the association world, right? So we had this group of really successful, very senior association CEOs who got into a room together and talked about the future for a couple of days, and only one of them brought up the World Wide Web, and everybody else kind of poo-pooed it. Not interesting, not gonna, I got an IT guy, I don't have to worry about that sort of thing. And then within a year, everything had changed. So it's really, I think it's a little bit of hubris for us to think that we actually know what's going to happen in the future, and how we can really predict with any form of accuracy, what we might see and how things might change. Obviously, right now, the thing on most people's minds is artificial intelligence, which is, while it's relatively new on the scene, it's actually been around for a few years. And I participated in a project when I was CEO of the Investor Relations Society that began in 2018, and we looked at the future of AI and how it would impact investor relations and investor communications. But now it's suddenly everywhere, and it is the thing, right?
Sure.
So I think it's really, really challenging. So, and when you think about things like leadership attributes and things of that nature, wow, I think that's really hard. Now, I look back and think about the styles of leadership and what's been important and how that has changed. And clearly, we've gone from sort of this command and control model of management and leadership that was really modeled after the military and the industrial model kind of
Sure.
who's in charge here thing. But that was breaking down for years before it became, something that everybody would say, well, we don't do that anymore. Now we're much closer to the decision maker. We're not bosses anymore. We're collaborators and communicators and leaders. So it did not happen overnight. And in fact, looking at things in a 20-year cycle, actually, I think is a pretty good idea. So given that, I just think that the leadership trait, the kind of concept, will be much more rapid decentralization of the boss model, of the who's in charge here kind of model. Much more focused on the collaboration model, and that's fostered by technology. It's fostered by the
Yeah,
boundaries that are demolished by technology, and it's fostered by the power of knowledge that's put into everyone's hands now.
yeah,
That it used to be power was accumulated because we fenced off knowledge and information, and so he or she who was able to retain information had an advantage over others and could
sure.
wield that authority, to wield that
Yeah.
power. Now it's ubiquitous and it's
Hey,
accessible.
let's
So
let's camp on that a little bit, Gary. You and I have talked about this in a couple of ways, before we got on our official recording here. One is historically people were centralized geographically. Everyone commuted and sat in the office. So there's a physical
yeah,
proximity. You
yeah.
built a wall around your members that was frankly very difficult to penetrate if you were an outside organization. You had to get lists, you had to mail stuff. So there were technology and financial barriers to penetrating that market. To kind of camp on what you said, where I see the leadership of an association really changing. We went from having these very hierarchical models to very decentralized models. And then as you had people in multiple locations, you had information coming from multiple streams. You also had, from a decentralization, kind of a never-ending, flow of information. I used to call it's a continuous and asymmetrical flow of information.
Mhm.
And when you got your first, text at 4 in the morning while you're traveling or some equivalent thing like that, that's an example. It never stops. It comes from every direction. And leadership then took on a very different tone when you couldn't control the information and you couldn't control the people directly.
Mhm.
I wonder, and I agree with you on AI, that's showed up on our sector research for 7 years now, and it's not new. I think what's new about AI is its democratization of competencies. And let me explain that. What really made the computer take off when you look at the adoption of like laptops and home computers was a graphical interface and the mouse.
Mhm.
The computers have been around a long time, but suddenly, Dean West, the marketing major, could use them,
Right.
through
Yeah.
programs like Excel and Word and the
You
mouse.
could
Okay.
point and click on something,
Yeah, exactly right.
was versus having
Yeah,
the right
yeah,
code to get
exactly
that
right.
answer.
And
Yeah.
so suddenly anybody could use the power of the computer. So today I was using just ChatGPT to develop prompts to create survey questions investigating price sensitivity. I don't have to be a statistician. I don't have to be a mathematician. I don't have to be a professional researcher to do that because all the underlying um, knowledge base is now contained in, so to speak, contained in ChatGPT.
Right.
So, as a leader, one of my hypotheses when I was thinking this morning was my expectations of my team go up. Why are you coming to me with this when I know you have this tool? It'd be like somebody not using spell check, somebody
Yeah.
not using, a calculator to do stuff. So not so much AI specifically, but how might your leadership change over the next 10, 15 years, and knowing that everyone who works with you, the members you serve, all have these tools at their disposal? What do you think the implications of that might be?
The ubiquity of information and knowledge, I think levels the playing field to a great degree. And so it I think it asks the question of leaders, how do you lead in that environment? And I think that the answers are more around culture, are more around uh, empowering people, creating the opportunities for people to be seekers of knowledge, to be innovators, to create answers to questions before
Sure,
they come to you as the leader with presenting the problem. Um, there's going to be a higher expectation, I think, of individual colleagues for them to come to you with more creative responses.
sure,
Um, and I think that so that then begs sort of begins the reframing of leadership to I hate to use a coaching kind of a philosophy, but a teacher kind of philosophy, a guide kind of philosophy. maybe even to deepen it, a sense maker, helping people make sense
Oh,
of
sense maker.
sense make. Yeah,
I like
sense
that one.
making.
I can use that one in one of my blogs sometime, Gary. I'm taking full credit for that too.
Oh, there you go. Sure. Yeah. Well, I think sense making is, with all the knowledge and information and ability to ask questions of machines and get all sorts of answers, and to embrace different viewpoints of folks. More and more, I find myself as
Sure.
a leader in that sort of sense making role, right? Just helping distill the information, helping to detangle
Sure.
the various viewpoints, and it's that sort of sense making operation that I
Okay.
think might be one of the ways we're going to see that
Sure.
leadership change.
Camp on that a little bit. You've run a variety of organizations, and when you think about developing a culture where the people who work at the organization actively seek out how to use new tools to innovate, because I think that's, for me, that's AI is now a tool we have at our disposal we didn't have before. Okay. What do you think of the various organizations you've run over the years? Are there some commonalities of how you've created a more positive culture that seeks out those sorts of innovations? How do you get people to experiment with these things, knowing full well there's more comfort in doing what they've always done? What would you, if I fired you today and dropped you somewhere else to be in charge, what would you do similar? What might you do different?
I've always tried to model the joy of learning,
Okay.
and the joy of experimenting, the joy of just sharing something new, and purposely, telegraphing, that's an old word, but
Yeah.
showcasing the joy of it, and making it apparent, making it clear that it's something that I value, that it's something that I encourage, and typically, in any new group that you come to and you're trying to instill that ethos, you find a couple of fellow travelers. You find a couple of folks who will go, oh yeah, okay, I'm down with that, and then you find the trim tab. You find the
Yeah.
thing that moves the wing, and I think that for me anyway, that's that sort of the helping people discover that joy of learning, the joy of applying these new things, and not being afraid of them,
Yeah.
and finding ways to diffuse the fear of it.
That's a great point. So some things you said, first of all, it's kind of sense making, which is we live in a dynamic and complicated world. And one of our roles as leaders is to create more simplified models or frame the issues for the folks who work with us, not just for us, work with us to help them to grasp what's important out of that complexity. Two, I like your comment on frankly just creating a positive culture for learning. And it's fun to learn new things, and it's fun to learn how a new thing can help you. And three, I'm hearing a little bit of you know you got to lead by example. If you're unwilling to learn, why would anybody else? If you're unwilling to do anything different, why would anyone else? And that is part of your job. I think what I'm most glad is you didn't say you should pay people more money or anything like that, because I don't want to pay anybody more money. That's like I would much rather. I would.
Although
I don't need. I don't need
although
that crap.
the market takes care of that. I don't have
Yeah,
to
I like them.
worry about
It's the market's fault. I'll remember that if I ever have to fire anybody. The
market
market,
fault.
market, decided you weren't. Well, and I find it interesting because again, Ian, in our industry, in the consulting sector, there's a lot of pressure to stay ahead of clients. You're supposed to know things
Yeah.
first, basically. But we have the same challenges of trying to convince people who work in consulting that they should do anything different. You become comfortable in your process. Here's how we develop a membership model. Here's how we develop a strategic plan, and it becomes difficult to change because they're known entities. And so I think everybody struggles with that. Kind of being maybe more dramatic, more specific. If we go forward 20 years, do you think there's a leadership trait or some attribute of association leadership that'll just frankly be obsolete? We'll look back and laugh at it. Kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's printing off emails. I remember that from long ago. I don't know what it would be. What do you think?
Oh,
What's obsolete?
yeah, well, I don't know. I'd still print it off an email now and then, depending on the circumstance. So, gosh, which leadership trait would be obsolete? Now, I think that's the challenge. I'm not so sure that um, I can say I could predict which leadership trait would become obsolete. I think I could predict which types of leaders will be obsolete.
Ooh, let's hear
Um,
that.
you know, the command and control, the
Yeah,
hierarchical, the person that feels that sitting behind the glass door with their name on it, you know, it gives them special knowledge or power, or, you know, that sort of thing. I think that style or that culture of leader, whether that's an attribute or not, but that style of leader, that approach to
sure.
leadership, I think uh, will, if not obsolete, it just simply won't work anymore.
Won't work anymore.
It doesn't
Yeah,
really work now, you know, let
yeah,
alone 20 years from now. But I think that there's going to be more. I think there's going to be more demanded of leaders. Um, you know, we're because you sort of touched on it that your clients or clients generally of consulting firms kind of expect and you know require to some degree consultants to be ahead of them, to know things, to you know to know to be around the corner already. We always talk
sure.
about looking around the corner. We always expect that you're already around the corner and you have the secret sauce. Um, I think that you're going to expect more of leaders in that way. So the leader who is not willing to maybe even put themselves out and push things that are not mainstream yet, that are not comfortable yet. You know,
Sure.
I sometimes tell my board, I'm not here to make your lives comfortable. I'm here to disquiet you. I'm here to challenge you.
Yeah,
You know, and but you know, that sort of you know gets their attention because I'm not here to just make them all feel good.
yeah,
I'm here to push this gigantic thing forward, and that sometimes requires us to be uneasy.
yeah. I'd like to camp on that. Part of this is as we get older, I think we become more comfortable with how little we know. I want to go
Mhm.
back to when I was a 20 something consultant and I knew everything. You know, that
Yeah,
was in a black suit and tie, like I was so confident. But I've been more upfront with boards that we as a sector don't know the answer to the questions they're asking.
yeah,
So we work a lot in healthcare associations, for example. Right now in healthcare associations, we probably work with around 75, 80 healthcare groups. And they come to us and say, "Oh, we're struggling with membership, or we're struggling with our annual meeting. What should we do?" And we have a research based approach that attacks that question. But to be honest, I don't think we as a sector understand what to do. And that includes the suppliers too. And it takes me back, AI is another good example. It takes me back when the web first came out, nobody knew how it worked. Some
right.
people knew how to produce a website. All the websites looked different because we didn't know how to do it. We as in everybody.
Mhm.
And eventually, over time, a lot of the websites started to look really similar because we got a sense of best practices on
Mhm.
navigation, best practice on the behind the scenes technology, best practice on functionality. And over time, that the sector realized how to use it. I think we'll see that very similar. So I think from a leadership trait standpoint, to camp on what you said, you not only have your board less comfortable with certainty, but you have to be less comfortable with certainty that you're going to try things and fail, and you just keep kind of poking at stuff and follow where your finger sticks through the dike. And I think that's a difficult leadership trait to teach the people who work for you, is to be
Yeah.
comfortable with that.
You know, that sort of lesson really came home to me in during the pandemic, you know, when uh, you know, I remember in, you know, April, May, June timeframe of 2020, um, being a little very much back on my heels and sort of a little bit depressed and shocked. I think, you know, shocked maybe is the best way of
Yeah,
putting it. Because up to that point, I had been, you know, in association management more than 30 some years and um, been CEO of several groups. And so I was pretty sure I knew all the answers, right?
yeah,
And at least I knew the questions if I didn't know the answers. And suddenly, you know, everything was upside down. And
yeah.
not only didn't I know the answers, I didn't know the questions. You know, so I was completely disquieted, and my, you know, my playbook was shredded, and I wasn't sure, you know, what was the next step? And no one did. And it was, we rely so much on our community, or we rely so much on each other to share examples of, people that are a little ahead of you, people that are in bigger groups with you that have, dealt with similar issues before, to ask advice. And you could ask advice, and nobody for a while there knew what was
Yeah,
going on.
nobody knew the answer to the question.
Nobody knew.
Yeah.
No, nobody knew the questions. So
It's interesting, on a product base, we ended up doing a lot of, and we still this day, we do basically virtual summits of leaders. And so we recently our healthcare summit we've done for virtual summits for clients. But the reason we did that was less of an intentional strategy. It's that a lot of our client base, their members didn't know what was going on as a result of the pandemic, and they couldn't wait for the journal. They couldn't wait for the
yeah.
Congress, and nobody knew what to do. And so the virtual summits, so to speak, and that oversees the big digital conferences, was like, let's put 50 people in a room and compare notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that fit well with us. We had the platform and we could capture the knowledge. So, but it wasn't an intentional strategy. But we had groups who couldn't wait for those traditional products to help people figure out what to do.
Right.
And that was the only mechanism to get around it. Kind of switching notes a little bit on that kind of the leadership balance. And I was talking to Joel Visa about this, and I loved his perspective. He runs American Planning Association, you know him. And he goes, in a normal leadership environment, I have people who report to me. I have people who, that's my staff team. I've got people who I'm responsible for, which would be like a committee or committees or stuff like that. I have people that tacitly I report to, which is my board of directors. And he goes, one of the fun things about association leadership is navigating these different leadership environments. And so when you think about, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, when you think of navigating these different leadership environments, what do you think will be similar or different to what you might have done earlier in your career?
It's an interesting question. I think what will be different. I think we're all going to be shifting roles. I think volunteering is changing. So when you look at that matrix, that those interacting circles of stakeholder groups, I think volunteering has changed rather dramatically over the decades. I think it's changed pretty significantly since the pandemic, at least in my little experience of it. I think the age of pretense is coming to an end, by which I mean, when I started in this business, it was all about, the volunteers get all the credit, the staff does all the work, and we never take the credit. We pretend that the volunteers came up with all these ideas and did all these things, and
and we all know it's wrong. I was told in my first association job that CEO said, "Subvert your ego." That's what you told to me. Yeah, it's not about you; it's about your volunteers. And yeah, I know you thought it up, and I know you wrote it up, and I know you implemented it. But pat your committee chair on the back and congratulate us for being so smart. Yeah,
right. We sort of had this, in some cultures that was more pronounced, and others different, less so. But it's very much this sort of culture of pretense, and I think the pandemic laid that more bare than it had been sort of reducing or slipping away over time in many places, but the pandemic laid that more bare because the volunteers didn't know what to do, and we were pushed to respond, as you were saying, respond rapidly to help people come up with answers. And so I saw a lot of our colleagues at that time having to step out and really lead and be truthful about what their role. That okay, so I'm the person in charge, and here's what we're going to do, or I'm the person that you're looking to, rightly or wrongly, you're looking to me to help you lead through this process. And so I think that as you think through that relationships, how are those going to change? I think that and again, over the decades, we've gone from, in the association world, from having executive secretaries to executive directors to executive vice presidents to presidents and chief executive officers. There's been this long journey to professionalization of associations, to more, if you will, the for-profit model, modeling that for-profit model, and that's been the biggest sort of change in many ways in the role of the association executive, and I think that that's going to continue. Because it's found, we found it to be more effective. Volunteers have found that to be more effective. That, you know, just pretending is not as good as performing. And I think that
good quote. Yeah, good quote.
And I think we have to put that in perspective. So that's one of the groups of stakeholders. I think the other is, you know, the folks that you work with, and you know, it's a much more collaborative, at least the way I do it today, and the way we try to, well, I think it's going to go. We've seen this flattening of higher, you know, structure. We've seen more empowerment of staff members, in part because they have access to information, they have the ability to communicate.
Sure.
You know, you don't have to ask somebody to, you know, put a paragraph in the newsletter that's coming out in 3 months, you know. So, and younger association executives who are coming in now are relative, they could not imagine a world like that, where you say, okay, you know, we're going to sit around and we're going to talk about what each of us wants to put in the magazine in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how we're going to promote our products and get them to do all the many things that we'd like.
I've been there. Yeah. Remember the blue line you would get from your printer, where you'd have to sign every page and make sure you didn't say anything naughty. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, it's a much more accessible way of working, I think. Yeah. So I think that those are some of the ways that we're going to change. And then, of course, there's the relationship with the outside world, if you will, and all the different stakeholders. And I think it's become the multiverse. You know, it's oh, there's just so many. And especially, you know, for me now, I spend just so much of my time just trying to maintain connection and relationships and relevancy and urgency with all these different stakeholder groups. I think that's going to continue to be a challenge for us.
Now that we've had kind of this conversation over the last 30 or so minutes, Gary, what do you think which association job do you think is most likely to be obsolete in the next 10 years?
Which association job will be the most likely?
Yeah, you think you like, if you had to hire people 10 years from now, you wouldn't hire them for this job because you wouldn't need them. And I'll give you an example, by the way, from market research. So when I started the company 25 years ago, I think I had 6 different suppliers to produce a survey. So I had to design the paper survey.
Yeah.
So I wrote it. You had to design it. You had to print it. When you got the results in, you hired a separate entity to tabulate it and create what we call the banners, and do the statistical back end. And then you had to get somebody to create the reports for you. And I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2. Today, all the statistical stuff, all the math is done automatically by our survey platform. So I don't need a senior level statistician on staff. I think we've had 1 reasonable statistical question in the last 25 years, from 20 years probably, from a client. So as a research firm, we don't actually need a statistician, because, and I would never hire one, because of the technology made them obsolete. I can make the case in associations, your meeting planners become obsolete.
Oh, that's
because it's a real estate sell. You've got space. We know the dimensions. We know how many people based on a fire code. You've got 100 people. There's a couple of questions. Is it interactive? Is it lecture? And you start filling in blank. And here's the 19 rooms in the city. Go find the one that works. Here's the top 3. What are the prices? Here's the 3 prices. So what do I need my meeting planner for?
I think that's a bit reductive for that particular. I mean, we're working on our convention, which is called Risk World. You can see it right here.
I know, I love it. It's a super engaging name. You never talked about it. I want to come.
Well, we love.
Like, here's a sample of risks that you can enjoy once you're at Risk World.
That's right.
Okay.
And we have 10,000 folks that participate in Risk World and 34 hotels. And there's a lot of not only just coordination, but safety and security. We had an
Sure.
active
Yeah,
shooter
you had your incident
situation
in Atlanta, yeah.
last year. We've had cybersecurity incidents. We have protesters. There is a lot to these things that's well beyond checking boxes and figuring out how many rooms you need and how many folks,
Yeah, that's fair.
let alone dealing with all the exhibitors and sponsors and things like that. And the design, creating the event, creating and the strategy around it
Okay.
all. So I'm not, we could argue
I know what
about
you're saying. So one is
and
there's
happy
a
to sit
human,
and
there's still a
have
human,
cocktails with you and argue about it.
yeah,
That
there's
for
still a
sure.
human
Debate it.
concept behind it,
Yeah.
that you can't replace because it's not a series of rules. It's not a transactional
Yeah. Yeah.
thing. It's a human side of things. So
It's
the
the people.
humans still have to navigate the relationships and compare, contrast. Again, I use Venn diagrams. You got the tactic of how many people in a room, but how does that relate to your marketing, and how does that relate to your public, reputational risk assessments, and all these kind of things that frankly, AI can't duplicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would be an example.
So getting back to your question, so which jobs will be obsolete? I think back to the jobs that are more or less already obsolete, that in my career. So we used to have the mailroom guy,
Oh yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
mailroom person, right? Who
yeah,
would get the mail, sort the mail,
yeah,
take the little buggy around and drop the mail in your
yeah,
inbox every day, or a couple times a day, actually.
yeah,
And then typically that person was also in charge of the copier, right? In many places. So because you would have to go have copies, you would take your little paper thing and take it to the
yeah,
copy room and say, I would like 25 of these,
yeah,
stapled in the corner and that sort of thing. And then later on they would deliver it to you. So that job is in most places. I haven't seen one in a while.
yeah.
And then there was the office receptionist who was ubiquitous in
Oh
associations.
yeah. First point of contact. Yeah,
First point of contact. I remember,
yeah,
certainly when I was at ASAE and you first person you talk to. And so a lot of those jobs, I think, have become obsolete. So, along those lines, will office managers, I
yeah.
don't know how many
The
are
office operations, those sorts of things. Yeah,
right.
customer service people. Yeah,
Yeah. And, call centers, and we're using for our, risk world, AI chatbots. We have
yeah.
Ricky is our AI chatbot. We're using translation. We're using
That's gonna be a big one. Yeah,
I think Wordly, I think it's called, and
yeah,
it automatically
yeah.
translates into 80 languages
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm
during the
familiar with
convention.
Wordly.
Yeah,
I think
it's
also stuff like, again, for me, anything that's rules based or kind of transactional based
yeah.
is technology is a good replacement. What we're going to see on our side of things is right now we have now 4 different software packages that from the raw data into a report. Okay, and each adds value along the way, but it's four different licenses I have to pay for, sadly, and I think you'll see a lot of that go away because you'll have a raw data set and you'll have um, AI prompts that will translate that raw data set into that graph,
Hmm.
as opposed to me doing it separately across each software. So I think some of the technical manipulation of data that is frankly expensive for
Yeah.
us, and not fun. No one pays us to translate stuff into graphs. I think a lot of that transactional stuff will go away. And that's kind of why I use meeting planning. A lot of this, a component of meeting planning
Yeah.
is that transactional, how many people in a room, given the room size and fire code and stuff like that. And it won't get you all the way there, but you'll get pretty close. Or simply, we used to have the FAQ section of the website. That was one of the new best practices. Now it'll be the chatbot. When
Right.
is my certification? How do I renew my certification? All
Right.
that'll be automated. So things like customer service groups, stuff like that, I think will be obsolete, frankly. But the
Right.
functions will still be necessary. I'll still
What
want to know when my certification's up. So,
right. What about consultants? I mean, can consultants be replaced by AI?
oh yeah, I think what you're going to say. Oh, seriously. I mean, there, when we think of consulting, there's kind of a couple big buckets. We know what questions to ask because we've done it a bunch of times, and we know question A does better than question B. But like
Hmm.
we have a sense of what we're going to learn. we have a toolkit we know how to apply. So like if you come to us for membership modeling or something, we have 3 or 4 different ways we can approach that. Okay, so then that's a judgment call. You can read the books about it. It's kind of a judgment call, what works and what doesn't work. You've got this translation of raw data into something we can analyze. I think that's what goes away first.
Mm.
And no one wants to pay us for that, but it takes a lot of time. It's also, and it takes judgment, like to categorize raw data. And it's no fun. Nobody gets into consulting to go through raw data and categorize it, but you have to do that before you can figure out what it all means. So the first step at my firm is, and I'm leading it because I don't want to work very hard, is what are some of the tasks we do that are annoying that nobody gives us money to do?
Yeah.
Can we replace them? Worst case is that makes us much faster. So we have produced reports much faster than we have historically. So as a client, you're getting one of our recent clients is actually Greg Mealy, you know, customer experience. We had a substantial amount of qualitative research or qualitative responses to their global survey that we collected. Historically, that's really hard to analyze. And generally what we would do is you could do it, it's just hard and it costs a lot of money because of the hours. We had that stuff categorized for him in less than a day. Okay. And again, we're not doing a lot more than categorizing it. That's part of our scope, but something that used to be really hard is now really easy. For us. Now you have to know how to ask AI to do it. You have to know
the prompts,
and you still have to edit it. In fact, I find AI is better if you know what you're doing. It's a tool in my toolkit that a younger consultant I think would struggle with. But I think the good news for clients in the near term is they're going to get faster service and have an expanded scope for the same amount of money. Because I can do it without really fundamentally altering my cost structure. I think in the longer term, our client base is going to start understanding that first tier of analysis is well within their own capabilities, and they don't need a consultant. And that's good news for everybody, because that forces the consultants, the advisors to associations, whether accountants or law firms or wherever it is, to frankly say, here's where our experience and knowledge can get applied. Here's where we see the results of that graph differently than you. As an example. And so if I'm a law firm, I don't need somebody to review my contracts anymore. There's an AI legal review, and it isn't perfect, but it'll get me 99% of the way there.
Get you a ways there.
Now I need my legal counsel to spend an hour instead of a day on it. Just make sure I don't miss anything, that sort of thing. So I think that's where on the advisory side, where AI is going to, you as a client aren't going to buy hours anymore. You're going to buy expertise and speed. And so we're already building that into our timeframes. Stuff that used to take us 5 months will take us 2, because the processing time of that raw data is so much faster. And so that's, again, beneficial to everybody, but some of the consultants are going to be terrible at it, just like some associations are terrible at some things they do. But so I'm old enough, I don't care, so I'm not going to be upset. I'll just retire.
I know, I'm closing in on it, so I get that. I get that feeling. So one of the so what when your question was, so what jobs will go away in the association world? But I guess my question is, what jobs will be added? What will be?
100% agree. 100% agree.
I think AI advisor, AI analyst, or that sort of skill set will be part of whether it's marketing or communications or.
Like specialty prompt development, stuff like that. I 100% agree with that. By the way, that's what I have an AI keynote I do now. That's part of it. There's nothing but opportunities for us out of this. Hey, I don't want to keep it. I don't want to keep it too long, Gary. I'm happy to keep talking to you because I never get a chance to chat with you very much. Kind of to close this out, give us your prediction of the association sector. What's positive, negative, all the above? What do you think is going to happen to us?
The death of the association sector has been predicted now for about 5 decades.
As long as we've been working in it.
Even before I started working in it, you know, and the imminent takeover of the association sector by for-profit companies has been predicted for about 5 decades. I remember, especially at the dawn of the internet in the late 90s, companies were sprouting up to create communities, and they could do all these things faster, and they had capital, and they could. And I was among those who was very fearful and very concerned about those things. And I saw them all, many companies arrive, spend, try things, and fail over and over and over again.
Yep.
Now, I've also seen associations do similar things or not thrived as much as they could and whatnot. But
Sure.
I think that the death of the association community has long been predicted and has yet to arrive. And so I think that we'll continue to provide some value to society, provide the opportunity for people to get together in various ways, totally different ways today than we did 40 years ago. But also, find ways to relate and solve problems together that we could not solve individually. And even, it's very easy. And we remember talking about this 20 years ago. Anybody now can get on the internet, anybody can get LinkedIn and create a group and get people rallied around, but sustaining that over
really
the decades, right? Getting public policy changed takes years often. You and I both have stories of how professions have taken literally 40, 50 years to get things done.
No, 100% agree.
So it's, we're in the association community is in it for the long haul. That's part of where we are in an institution that remains. So that sticking power, the staying power, I think is still important. Now, obviously, the forms that we take, the way we interact, the way we communicate, all of that will continue to be different and continue to evolve. And how we manage the world of quantum computing and all of those things.
That's the next generation's problem, Gary. That's where I come down on.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll all work out for them. That's where I come down on it.
We'll be on the beach by the time that.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I hope I got to make it. Race to Retirement's my book. Not Race to Relevance. Hey, Gary, I just really want to thank you for spending time with us today. It's always fun chatting with you and hearing your perspectives. You're one of the smarter, more accomplished folks I know in our profession, arguably that I just know. And I always like hearing what you have to say. So thanks for joining us on 25 Lessons in Leadership, and looking forward to sharing this recording with others and letting them gain some of your wisdom. So appreciate it.
Thank you. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you.